There was one story in particular that she told and was often and was very impressive. I know she told it very emotionally, and she told it in the first person, and she told it like people will do when they're emotionally upset. It wasn't her normal voice. She told it, and you know how people, when they get very upset, a person, their tone of voice changes, and she used that tone of voice, and she told it very exciting, and I remember it in great detail, exactly how she would tell it. She would say that the Indians came across the valley to the schoolhouse, and we were alerted to the fact, and we were very scared, and the children, a lot of them, went through the window in the north end of the house, which I was the end from which the door was and where the Indians were coming. Evidently there was only one door and one window in the place, and a lot of them went out through that window, the larger children mostly. Some of the children stayed in the house, and some of the children, including my grandmother, evidently the log cabin had a lot of cracks in it, like log cabins sometimes do, and the floors in it were composed of large rough-hewn timbers, and some of them were loose, especially around the door. And my grandmother and some of the children took refuge under the floor. And grandmother would say, and the Indians came to the door, and the teacher wouldn't let them in, and they shot her with many, many arrows, and she fell dead on the floor with her eyes open. Evidently there was enough space in the cracks that they could peep through the cracks and see her, and they saw that, like people do when they die, that their eyes are open. And their eyes were open, and she would relate that, and we were very scared because all that time, evidently, they could hear what was going on. They could hear the conversation. They could hear. They knew that she was shot, and it said, and she related that was dead on the floor with her eyes open, and her blood came through the cracks in the floor, the big cracks, and the blood tasted salty. Evidently it got to her, in her hair and all, where she could taste it. She knew, remembered it, the blood tasted salty, and it got in my hair, and it got in my dress, and I was very scared. And when the Indians left, she would say, I never knew exactly how long she was on the floor, but to her it was a long, long time. Evidently there was perhaps more than one board that was loose. Evidently some of the other children were under the floor and were able to get out. But she said when the Indians left, she was dead on the floor, and we couldn't lift the board and get out. And the blood remained in my hair and in my dress for a long, long time. She didn't relate her father come and get her, but evidently from the accounts that I can gather from other people, her father eventually came to that schoolhouse, and I don't know how long after I read it, but of course as a small girl it was a long, long time. And when you got her out from under, they relate that she was hysterical, as you can imagine, and he just took her and shook her physically until she was able to calm down enough to kind of tell him what had happened. And she said, the blood stayed in my hair and my dress for a long, long time. I have no way of knowing how long it was. I'm sure to her it was a long time, and you can well imagine that for a small girl this was an extremely traumatic experience for the child. And I'm sure that evidently they tried to get her stored before they thought about cleaning her up or anything. And I'm sure that probably grandfather and grandmother, even though they loved the children, probably eventually took her home and washed her up and changed her hair and washed the blood out of her hair and looked around for any arrow wounds or anything traumatic that had happened to her, and found that physically she was all right, and just said, well, we're thankful that nothing happened to her bad. But that I don't think was really true.